In the winter of 1949, the Lamberts moved into a 2-story farmhouse outside Augusta, Maine. It wasn't much to look at: warped floorboards, chipped paint. A draft that never left the kitchen but for Thomas and his wife. Clara, it was home. They bought it cheap from a distant cousin who said, "The attic's sealed. Don't bother with it." He laughed when he said it. Evidente. For the first few months, life was simple. Thomas worked nights at the mill. Clara spent her evenings reading by the radio. But she started to notice things. Small, harmless things at first. The radio would click on by itself. Her sewing needles disappeared. And sometimes, when she came home alone, she swore she heard footsteps above her head. Thomas said it was mice. He even went up to check, but the attic door was painted shut. No latch, no knob, just old boards, nailed in place. Decades ago, when he shined his flashlight up through the cracks, dust fell like snow. No sound, no movement. He sealed it again and forgot about it. Clara didn't. By March, she couldn't sleep. Every night around 3 a.m., a creak, a slow drag, like someone pacing directly above the bedroom ceiling. She tried to tell herself it was the house settling, but one night, when she turned off the lamp, she saw a faint orange glow leaking through the attic floorboards like candlelight. She woke Thomas, trembling. They went upstairs together, flashlight in hand. The light was gone. When Thomas put his ear to the ceiling, he said he heard something strange. Not movement, but breathing. He laughed it off, kissed her forehead, told her she'd been dreaming. But the next morning, when they came downstairs, one of the family photographs on the wall was missing. 2 days later, Tay found it under the radiator, but someone had drawn over it in pencil. Eyes, darker and larger than before. Every face was circled except theirs. That week, Thomas called a local carpenter, Mr. Hill, to finally open the attic. Hill arrived on Friday afternoon. He said it looked like the boards hadn't been touched since the 1920s. The nails were rusted, wood swollen with age. When he pried the first one loose, the air that came out was cold. Inside, they found a room. Not an attic full of storage boxers, but a space that had clearly been lived in. There was a cot mattress, a rusty lantern, and a small stack of photographs pinned to the wall, all of them taken from above the same farmhouse rooms, the Same Anglis, but decades apart. Children, parents, different owners, each photo perfectly centered on the same spot, the master bedroom bed. Clara fainted when she saw it. Thomas told Hill to pull everything down, but when they tried to remove the cot, they found something underneath. A square cut out in the floor, barely large enough for a person to crawl through. Inside, a hollow space ran between the attic floor and the ceiling below a crawlway. From there, whoever lived up there could see straight into the bedroom through tiny slits in the boards. Thomas vomited. Hill said nothing, just backed away slowly, muttering, "Christ." He was watching them all. The sheriff came the next morning. He documented the photos, the cot, the lantern, and filed the case as unlawful habitation. But the strangest part wasn't the setup, it was the timeline. The last photograph found in that attic was dated January 12, 1949, a full month before the Lamberts moved in, and on the back of it, written in faded blue ink, "She looks like the others." After that, Thomas nailed the attic shut again. They lived there another 2 months. But Clara's health deteriorated. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. She told her husband, "He's still up there. I hear him moving when you're gone." Thomas checked every night. Nothing. But one evening, when he returned home early from the mill, he found the radio on, tuned to static, and the front door unlocked. Clara was gone. He searched the house, calling her name. When he reached the attic stairs, he froze. The borzid, nailed shut, were open. And at the top, a dim orange glow flickered like candlelight behind thin wood. Thomas climbed slowly, his breath visible, his hands shaking. When he reached the attic floor, the lantern was burning again, and beside it, on the cot, lay a fresh photograph. It showed Thomas himself, standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, exactly as he had been a moment ago. The photograph showed Thomas the way a stranger would see him. 1 foot on the first step, mouth slightly open, eyes unfocused, caught in the act of not yet knowing. He didn't remember walking back down the stairs, but he must have, because he found himself in the kitchen, sitting at the table with both hands flat on the oilcloth. The lantern flame above him made a soft oval of light through the ceiling. The house clicked and sighed. He whispered Clara's name until his voice ran out. At 2:11 a.m., the sheriff returned with a deputy. They went up together. The attic looked the same. Cat, lantern. The wall of photographs from older decades carefully lifted and boxed, but the fresh photograph was no longer on the cot. It had been pinned to the wall in the empty spot where the Lamberts' own family picture had once hung. Underneath it, in small pencil marks, someone had written a date and time. Tonight. The crawlway between joists was open again. A narrow blackness ran along the length of the ceiling. The sheriff reached in with a yardstick and touched nothing but cold air. He told the deputy, "Tickets wine." They strung a simple trip line across the crawl space and tied a bell to it. If anyone slid through, it would ring. They found no sign of Clara. The sheriff asked Thomas a question he would later repeat in his report. "Has anyone else had access to your house?" Thomas said no. Then, "I work nights. I'm gone from dusk to near dawn." He stared at the tiny viewing slits cut into the attic floorboards. "He can see our bed from there," he said, as if learning a truth about gravity. They searched the property until morning. No footprints in the snow, no tire tracks on the road. The lot line to the north ended in a stand of pines. In the half-light, the trees made the sound of a distant audience. By noon, the sheriff asked Thomas to leave the house overnight. Deputies would stay inside with the lights off. If the man in the attic came back, they'd hear the bell. Thomas checked into a boarding room in Augusta and sat on the bed, fully dressed, until the clocks in the hall chimed 3 times. He didn't sleep. The bell never rang. But in the morning, when the deputies came down for coffee, they found 3 photographs on the kitchen table, neatly fanned like cards. The first was of Clara, seated on the bedroom floor with her back to the bed. Her hands were folded. Her head was turned as if listening to someone speaking over her shoulder. The second was of the attic from a corner high and impossible, a vantage point that shouldn't exist, showing the cot, the lantern, and the deputies themselves asleep in chairs, mouths open, winter coats pulled tight. The third was of an empty crawlway viewed from inside it. The camera tilted so the joists became a narrowing hallway toward a pin of light. The slit above the Lamberts' bed. None of these photographs had been taken on the Lamberts' camera. The film stock was older, thinner, the paper different. In a certain angle of light you could see the faint stamp of a defunct processing lab in Bangor. Harbor photo, closed 1937. Someone had been developing film with supplies that no longer existed. The sheriff called in the state police. They posted an officer outside. They dusted for fingerprints on door frames, chair backs, the lantern, the cot. The report would later note multiple partials of an unknown adult male. Knotto fingers, unusual ridge spacing. On the photographs, as if they'd been handled with gloves, or skin that left no oil. Clara returned on the 4th day. Thomas found her on the front steps just before dawn, in the cloth coat she'd worn when she went missing, hair full of loose dust like attic insulation. Her shoes were dry despite last night's snow. She had a pencil tucked behind one ear. The deputies sleeping in the cruiser hadn't seen her approach. In the hospital, Clara told a measured, exhausted story to a nurse and a woman from the county. The recording survives in fragments. He doesn't speak. He lets you speak. He's polite. He likes the sound of the radio, not the voices, the static part. Does he live in the attic? Live is not the word. He rests there when we are not watching. Where were you kept? Not kept. Long pause between floors. When asked what she meant, Clara tapped the arm of the chair. "There's room," she said softly, "between one life and the next, a slit to see through." She refused to say more. She asked for her husband and a hairbrush. She slept almost 20 hours. When Sawoke, she did not remember the interview. To understand the next part, you have to understand the house. Built in 1894 by one Ephraim Pike, the farmhouse had been modest, then added on to twice. The attic had never been meant for storage. The beams were not weight-bearing in a way that encouraged boxers. But sometime in the late 1920s, renovations created a false platform above the bedroom salinia. Shallow mezzanine with just enough space for a person to slide along if they were thin and patient. A dry-walled knee wall hid the crawlway entrance. Whoever designed it knew what they were doing. Town ledgers list Pike's profession as watchman. Not for the mill. For the poorhouse 3 miles south since demolished. He died in 1931. No record of a wife. His next of kin was a nephew who never came to claim the property. The poorhouse records are thin. A ledger of residence, a list of punishments, a schedule for the bell that called men to meals. In the margin of a winter page from 1928, someone wrote a phrase. The county historian underlined twice. Attic time, no explanation. The state police decided the Lamberts wouldn't move back in until the attic was taken apart. Boards, joists, even the false floor. Everything would go. A crew arrived with crowbars and a promise to make it standard and safe. They worked for a day and a half. By evening, the attic looked like the skeleton of a ship. The cot went to the dump. The lantern and photographs went into labeled evidence bags. The crawlaway, that's what you want to call a long breath between 2 layers of wood, was open to the cold, made a proper gap where no one could hide. That night, with the attic standing open to the rafters, the deputies kept their watch again. Just after 3, the radio clicked on by itself, turned to a bed of gentle hiss. From upstairs came a sound like paper being pulled from a nail. By the time they reached the attic, the open rafters were bare. The entire wall of historic photographs, 1930s tenants, 1910s tenants. A baby balanced on a father's forearm in 1902 had vanished from the evidence bags. The floor, the table, in their place lay a single new photograph faced. When the sheriff turned it over, the deputies stepped back without meaning to. It showed a modern living room they didn't recognize. Newer furniture, TV in the corner, a child's plastic ring stack, and on the far wall, in perfect focus, the Lambert farmhouse is fairy house reflected in the glass of a framed family portrait, as if from the perspective of someone standing behind the camera, breathing. On the back, in a new pencil hand. Next, the sheriff locked the house. He told the Lamberts the truth as he understood it. The structure was compromised in ways he could fix. The problem was not. Thomas sold within the month. For decades, the house changed hands. Owners painted, modernized, tore out walls. The attic was turned into a playroom, then a home office. Contractors said the ceiling joists had a way of singing when winter set in. They chalked it up to temperature. No police calls, no formal complaints. People are good at not noticing when noticing would cost them. In 1974, a fire took the kitchen and the stairwell. In the insurance photos, there is a strange streak in the smoke, a vertical thread of something darker than the dark around it. A negative form leaning in the corner where the attic stairs had once begun. An adjuster circled it in blue pen, then crossed the circle out, embarrassed by himself. A year later, a letter arrived at the sheriff's department from out of state, with no return address. Inside was a single photograph and a short note. The photograph. A nursery. White paint, moon and star border. A rocking chair by a window. On the floor, a pile of feathers, carefully arranged in an oval, like a nest. The note? He waited until we slept. He's very quiet when he is proud. No case file was opened. The letter went into the same cardboard box that held the Lambert materials and slowly drank the smell of paper. In 1992, the county archive was moved to a new building. Night porters pushing dolly carts noticed a small thing. Every time the Lambert box passed under a light, the bulb would dim and brighten as if matching breath. One of the molders, superstitious, refused to touch it after the first run and called in sick for the rest of the week. The younger porter taped the lids shut more tightly and whistled because it felt silly not to. That same year, a graduate student named Diane R., cataloging the collection, made a photocopy of the Tonight photograph the one of Thomas caught on the stairs to use in a slide presentation. When she lifted the cover, the copier lamp froze halfway across the glass and hummed, unable to finish its pass. The page came out half exposed and in the blank field where the stairs should. VV being a set of handwritten numbers emerged slowly as the toner cooled. 1263 nanas. If the machine had made a clock of the emptiness and marked its hours, Diane didn't include the slide. She did, however, add a small note to the finding aid. Unclear why the man took such care with composition. Subjects centered, angles replicated over decades, suggests training. Watchman background. There is no evidence anyone saw the note. But it feels right. In 2007, the farmhouse was finally torn down. The lot became a pair of condominiums, with vinyl siding and efficient windows. The crew found nothing special in the ruble. Busted glass, old nails, a bed frame. The attic timbers were hauled away and put in a pile that caught rain until it grew a small forest of saplings. A month after the last truck left, the new HOA president received a package with no return. Inside, a manila envelope, an index card, and 6 photographs, developed on cheap drugstore paper. The index card read, "He follows the idea of a house more than the boards." The photographs were all interiors of the new condos empty rooms. White walls, recessed lights. In each frame, the camera faced a blank wall from roughly 7 feet off the ground, as if perched on a narrow ledge. In the middle of that wall, in each picture, sat a pencil dot. The dots, when mapped onto the building plan, lined up to form a pathoshallow corridor drawn between ceiling and floor, moving through gypsum and joists, exactly where the Lambert crawlway had once run. In the final photograph, the dot had become a small circle. Next to it, someone had printed 2 words in the margin listening place. The HOA didn't call the police. They installed new smoke detectors and argued about lawn care, which brings us to the only recording of a voice we can attribute to the man in the attic. It's not what you think. There is no tape of him moving, no rasp at the edge of a microphone. The voice only exists in a written transcript taken in 1950 at the state hospital in Augusta, where a patient, name suppressed in the surviving papers, told a doctor about a practice he called overseeing. "You find the slit?" he said. "What slit? Between doing and being done to." Why attics? Because no one goes there until they have to. It's a good place to be present without being seen. "What do you watch for?" "Change," the man said, "when the room stops being itself and becomes someone's idea of safety. And then you take a picture." So the room has to remember. The patient died that same year. There is no evidence he ever lived at the Pike farmhouse. There is no evidence he didn't. What happened to the Lamberts? Thomas left the mill, took a job 3 towns over. He and Clara rented a smaller place by the river and slept with the radio unplugged. They never had children. Their marriage survived by becoming gentle too, people moving around the shape of a thing they would not name. Clara did not like ceilings. She preferred porches and the open air. In summer, she hung a thin muslin over the bed frame like a tent. To keep out dust, she told a neighbor who asked. The neighbor told someone else. She thought it was beautiful the way the cloth tumbled in a draft. Years later, when the neighbor moved, she left a box of household goods for the Lamberts on the porch. At the bottom was a small, framed photograph. It had no family in it at all. Just a white sheet suspended from the ceiling, rippling like a sail. Thomas died first. In an envelope with his papers, Clara kept a single image of the first photograph from the attic. The one of him on the stairs face. In old age, she would sometimes pick up the envelope and hold it like a book you mean to finish but never will. When she passed, the executor found the picture and returned it, as property of the county, to the same cardboard box. If you visit the archive and ask to see that box, they will bring it to a table under lights that hum politely. The photographs are still there. Men and women asleep in their beds under different quilts. Children blowing out birthday candles with the kitchen door ajar. A chair in a corner. A ceiling seam. A slit. You can look until you decide you'll be odd and ogie. You can sign the sheet and leave. The bell over the entrance will ring when you push the door easy. Harmless. It was meant to announce patrons, but in the quiet, it sounds like something lightly tugging a string. When you get home, you may feel the need to stand in your hallway and listen to your own house speak. You may tell yourself that the whir of the fridge and the settling of beams belong to a catalogue of normal. You will be right. But if, in the weeks after, you find a photograph tucked under your doormat or slid between the pages of a book you thought was yours, the image simple and undecorated, a picture of your ceiling, taken from the height of a man balanced between one layer and the next, you should close your eyes and ask yourself a question the Lamberts learned to live without answering. What do you call the space where watching becomes a way to be? There is no official explanation. The county will tell you the house was demolished. The lot is stable. There have been no calls. But the photographs do not stop. They move forward the way a house does, by memory, and somewhere behind drywall, above warmth, below roofline a patient, man rests where no one looks, until they must. He prefers the radio when it whispers. He waits for the next family who believes the attic is empty. End of transcript. True Lore Archives, 2025.